health has been so misconstrued and so confusing for so long. HRV allows us to come back and understand how our body is adapting to stress and strain. So chronic illness is causing 71% of deaths in America year over year. HRV is the answer, is your body's form of communication as to how your body is adapting to stress and strain, mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Rewire Your Life podcast. I'm Dr. Alok, aka Dr. Rewire. Today's guest is going to blow your mind. I'm so excited to talk to this guy about what he does, how he does it at the level that he does it at. It's completely amazing. And for some of you, you understand the term HRV. For some of you, you don't. It's a completely new term. And really, it's something that I've been studying for about 20 years of my life, being in practice, working with patients, and I've seen the effects of it and how it results in health and well-being. And some of the Rewire work, we actually measure HRV as well. So we're looking at it. And this guy is the expert when it comes to everything HRV, and especially when it comes to sleep. And I love to learn about sleep, as many of you know. And in this podcast, what I want to cover with him is how do we get better? How do we use our HRV to maximize our performance, maximize our business, maximize our money, but most of all, maximize the human expression of life? Please help me welcome my friend, Justin. I'm going to butcher this, so please help me say this right. Roethlingshoefer. Am I saying it right?
Nailed it.
Hey, man. Now, you've been all over, man. You've worked with the NHL. You've created the Hockey Summit. You've got 3 books, The Intent, Athletic Performance Blueprint, Own It. You worked with NHL teams and hockey in the NHL for, I think, 7 or 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. You've got a bachelor's in movement science and a master's in science and exercise physiology from Louisville. Please, you are all over with this stuff, man. Thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be back back in communication with you. I know we did this on my show not 2 or 3 weeks ago. So yeah, it's amazing to have another great conversation and provide more value for your audience.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Well, there's going to be lots of value. I know that because, we got in touch through a mutual connection, and I didn't know the depth of the work that he was involved in. And he understood the work I was in. And there's such a beautiful marriage in the work that we do. And it's so similar. And our thinking is so similar along this path and line as well. But, from your perspective, let's just tell the listeners, what is HRV and what's its value to someone's health and well-being?
So I think even before understanding like HRV, I think when you come back to it, health has been so misconstrued and so confusing for so long. And what I love about heart rate variability is that HRV allows us to come back and understand how our body is adapting to stress and strain. Now, if I kind of outline chronic illness and overall health in a unique way for you, we can think about it this way. Our body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional stress. And the reaction is thus the same, which comes into an activation of the sympathetic nervous system, an increase in inflammation in the body. And inflammation in the body is ultimately what leads to chronic illness. And chronic illness is causing 71% of deaths in America year over year.
Let's say that one more time. So everyone catches that. Chronic inflammation is the leading cause of death in the United States. 71% of the people are dealing with chronic inflammation. That's huge.
Chronic inflammation is what leads to chronic illness. So you talk about your cancers, your diabetes, your adrenal fatigue, your Alzheimer's, dementia. All of these stem from chronic inflammation. And inflammation is ultimately established or triggered by stressors, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And so when you break that down and you're like, man, the leading cause of chronic illness is chronic inflammation. How do I know if I'm in a chronic inflammatory state? How do I really identify this? How do I become more aware? First step of anything, any type of change is awareness. How to become more aware of how my body is currently operating or what state I'm currently in. And that answer is heart rate variability, because HRV is the answer, is your body's form of communication as to how your body is adapting to stress and strain, mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional.
And so, I mean, I love that definition. I love that explanation as well, right? Chronic inflammation leads to chronic illness. I couldn't agree with you more on that. When you look at chronic inflammation, and like there's chronic inflammation, But there's also the factor of like, what about acute inflammation as it relates to HRV as well? Because right now, like I'm wearing my Aura ring, right? I used to wear the Whoop, and now you can get HRV on your phone. You can get HRV like in your Apple Watch. You measure it everywhere, but I think a lot of people don't understand its depth. And then sometimes they look at their HRV like in a acute scenario, and they say, "Oh my God, this is a really bad thing." Can you kind of go through like the difference in that side of it a little bit?
Yeah, so I always discuss and I always educate this in what I call the 4 quadrant system. So think about a page divided into 4. So you've got 4 different quadrants, and in the upper left-hand quadrant, you've got this phase of overreaching, this overreaching quadrant. In the bottom right quadrant, you have what's called regeneration. In the upper right quadrant, you have what I call ownership. In the bottom left quadrant, you have what we call burnout. Now, in order to grow, in order to develop, in order to get stronger, in order to run faster miles, in order to build a family, build a business, you have to stress yourself. Stress is necessary for growth.
Yeah.
But it's only in acute doses paired with the right amount of regeneration that we ultimately start to see the benefits of that growth, the benefits of that stress. And so it's intermittent on and off stressors that our body is able to handle mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, that allow us to toggle in a more purposeful way. So if we think about this, we want to be in this upper left quadrant, this overreaching quadrant for certain periods of time. Given, I'll give this perfect example. Client was building a business. They were in a real push phase, right? They were in the tax industry. It was coming up on May, and for the last 3 months, it was just like pedal to the metal, go, 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 go. The same client was also going through issues at home with their marital situation, and that was causing mental and emotional stressors. Well, at the same time, there was opportunity for him to sell his business, and he was like, well, what am I going to do next? So you've got mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual stressors all coming in. And as we started talking about what was going on with this client, at month 2, they got this unbelievable flu that threw them down for about 3.5 weeks in the midst of when they should actually be at their best. And if we take a look back at how these stressors started to stack upon themselves, they stayed up in this overreaching space for 2.5 months. And your body is not built to handle chronic stress over that period of time. Now, conversely, you go and you now look at somebody who creates rhythm in their life and is able to toggle over between overreaching and regeneration. And they ultimately end up performing in this upper right quadrant, which is ownership, this space of true presence, true work ethic, true purpose, true intentionality, true energy, this true life that we want to live in. And all it takes is being able to understand what regenerative processes you have to go through. And so as we started to work with him, and for a long time, he was like, I don't want to do this meditation stuff. I don't believe in this breathwork stuff. I can't give myself 20 minutes in the morning to actually focus on these intentional purposes. And because I need to be working, I need to get this done. It's a push time. Well, as he got into this deep level of sickness, he came out of it and he goes, Justin, whatever you say, like, we're going to do, because I just left my business for 3.5 weeks in a time that I should be at my best, and my way is no longer working. And if you asked him today about his 20 minutes in the morning that he does from a meditative and breathwork sequence, he goes, that breathwork and meditative sequence of 20 minutes buys me 6 hours of highly productive, highly focused, highly intentional work throughout the day. And it's that a bit, and now he actually cuts it up and uses 3 bouts of 20 minutes throughout the day. So he takes an hour, and he says that hour is equivalent to 18 hours of deep intentional work in the 24-hour period. And so if you think about this concept for a second, you have these stressors that you know of, also that you don't. Sitting here on this podcast is a stressor. Stress is all around us. I'm having to process information. You're asking me questions. I'm having to think. I'm now having to articulate it and then communicate it back. That is a stressor for my body to ultimately exude. Going and doing my workout this morning was a stressor on my body. Traveling back home from Colorado to Miami tomorrow is going to be a stressor on my body. Now, if I don't balance or create rhythm within that to pour back into myself, I will end up with a cup that is overflowing of stress load that my body is no longer able to handle. And thus, chronic inflammation begins, chronic symptoms begin, lack of sleep, irritation, indigestion, diarrhea, brain fog, you name it. These are the symptoms that come out of this. But what have we done as a society? We've just normalized them. We've said, oh, that's just what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Oh, that's just a part of being in a marriage.
Grind it out philosophy.
That's just what it takes to be a father or a mother.
Yeah, it's all about grinding out more and more and more. The more you grind it out, the more successful you are, which is actually not the truth. I love what you said, like your 4 quadrants, and your 4 quadrants, and where you say is the place where you own it. I call that the inspired life, right? That's where you have stress and you have equal amounts of stress and balance, stress and stressors that are pushing in your life, but also equal rest and rejuvenation inside that. So when you look at an entrepreneur and you look at their sleep patterns, let's talk about sleep, because I know you have your PhD or your master's was in sleep and heart rate variability. Am I correct?
Correct. I did all my postgraduate work in sleep, heart rate variability, and recovery science. That's correct.
So what are your thoughts on all these devices that are out there, like the Oura Ring, the Whoop? What are your, from an expert standpoint, what do you think about them when they measure your heart rate variability at night?
So number one is I love them as a tool. The downside is that as a society, we've thought that just going and grabbing a Whoop band or grabbing an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or a Polar or an Oura Ring is all of a sudden going to fix our sleep issues, is all of a sudden going to fix our stress issues, where in actuality, a tool is at the top of the pyramid. And we have to fix behaviors, habits, and actions before we start to see any of this. And so HRV sits at that core base, because the moment that we can understand the feeling and correlate a number, heart rate variability, to the actions that we are or are not engaging in or adhering to, we can start to program our minds to saying, oh, you know what? This behavior is actually moving the needle for me. Stopping eating 3 hours before bed is actually helping me get into higher states of sleep, higher depth of sleep, higher recovery rates throughout into the next day. What I do not like about these tools is that we have, again, created more confusion with these algorithmic states, your sleep score, your recovery score, your readiness score, your strain score. Whatever happened to just true raw HRV? Let's understand one number. That's it. And not confuse all these algorithms that are telling you how you're supposed to perform. Because now what happens is it starts to come into our mind and go, oh, well, I'm actually not recovered today. Oh, well, I'm actually not able to perform today. When in actuality, that's not true. There is no metric that can predict performance. I need to say that again. There is no metric that can predict performance. The only thing that it can do is it can help guide us on what habits and action steps we can put into our lives that will create change that ultimately will create our outcomes.
It's really interesting because, like, I look at my HRV, and I've really been working on my HRV actually really quite a bit as well. And just I like the idea of concentrating on it and saying, okay, this is my focus. I don't really care about the sleep score and all that stuff that comes along with it, even though it is really interesting. I can pretty much, when I get up in the morning, when I go into my Aura app, I can pretty much predict my actual readiness score almost to within a couple inside of it. Like today, I was a little bit tired because I just flew back. We had 4 days of soccer tournaments with my son, just running all over the place. I was like, I'm a little fatigued. I got up this morning. I felt it. And I knew it. I was like, all right, it's recovery day. So I actually took it as an interesting sign. It's okay, you know what? I'm going to actually use this as a barometer to see. Normally I would go train for an hour, go lift weights and do high intensity training. But I said today, you know what? I'm just going to do a light walk and use it as a tool, just as a light walk, as a recovery mechanism inside that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And let me ask you this, because everyone says this, is that HRV is so individual specific. But there's got to be ranges of normalcy, isn't there? Like there's got to be some levels that you look at and say, what's normal? So if you look at it and say, you know, what's a normal range for a healthy or an athletic individual inside that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And even to that touch point that you just discussed is, I want to go back into this concept because I don't want the listeners to think HRV again is this predictor of performance, or like my HRV is down and thus I'm going to have a down day. I came out here to Colorado Springs and flew on an early morning flight, was up at 4:30 in the morning to catch the flight, left at 6. Then I get out here, I'm at altitude, 12,000 feet. That's where I'm living at on a norm right now. I've got an elevated resting heart rate, not getting into the depth of sleep that I need every single night. And thus HRV is depleted. But because I've taken necessary steps of increasing my hydration, increasing electrolytes, focusing on breath work more throughout the day to get back to these regulated states, my energy is at a high. I feel extremely focused. I'm extremely attentive and I feel great. And so what HRV is telling me is that, hey, Justin, your body is under more stressors. Thus, the lifestyle implications that you have to be just that much more dialed in. And so I'm able to make these changes. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be that I have to sit in bed or I have to just like sit at my desk and not move. That's the complete opposite of what we're actually wanting. And
it's not a disease. It's not a disease.
Exactly.
It's people sometimes think, oh, my HRV is high or low. It's a disease. No, it's a way for you to change your behaviors to adjust so you can get increases. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct. And what I say HRV is it's a way to find out where you are. Everybody knows where they want to be with health. They have this picture. They wake up in the morning full of energy, able to go work out, able to do everything on their task list they have throughout the day. They come home, they've got energy to play with their kids. They've got energy to be present with their spouse. Then they're able to put their head down on their pillow at night, have a deep, deep sleep and wake up rejuvenated, vibrant, and ready for the next day. They know what it looks like. But the issue is that we don't know where we are. We don't know where we are on a day-to-day basis. And so I give this story. I'm born and raised in Edmonton, the biggest mall in the world. It's like 37 phases. It's over like 700 acres. Like it is freaking huge. It's got a baseball diamond, a water park, a Galaxyland, movie theaters, and then you've got your stores in there. It's got a submarine tour thing. It's wild. I went back home and I parked and I went to the mall. I parked at D3, big green sign, parked there right outside the water park, walked in, did my thing for about 3 hours. And I was making my way out. I was like, man, I don't know where my car is. I know it's at D3. I know it's right outside the water park. And as I was walking out, I went to one of those directory signs that they have in there and it showed me a map. The most important thing that I looked at on that map was not where D3 was, but where I was. That little red dot that says you are here.
Yeah.
That's what mattered, because then I was like, oh, I just took a wrong turn over here and I just need to go up and turn right. And there's my car, D3, right outside the water park. But if I didn't know where I was, I would have continued to go left and right and left and right, and I would have stayed lost continually. And that's what HRV does for us. It allows us to know, where are we every single day? How is our body handling stress and strain? And what action step do I have to do in order to help and give direction back to what my body's actually asking for? And so going back to what your question was in terms of ranges, everybody's HRV is different. Everybody's unique. However, there are certain ranges that we should be looking at and that we should be expecting. If you're between 30 and 40 years old, you should have an HRV somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 85. That's the ranges. That's what we should start to find. If you're 40 to 55-ish years old, we should be somewhere in that 30 range to about 65, somewhere in there. And then if you're 55 plus, we should be anywhere from that 25 to about 55 range. And what you'll notice is that if you're on the lower ends of that range, or you're even below that, there is chronic stress in your life, whether you know it or whether you don't, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, that is creating chronic inflammation in your body that your body's constantly having to deal with, that is ultimately closing your window of going from being able to be preventative in this to a point where you're going to have to go into some form of treatment for a chronic illness. And that should be a wake-up call. Is a lower HRV chronically is a signal that your body is under chronic stress and strain, leading to chronic inflammation that is taking you down a road that will lead you only to a place of chronic illness. And what we have to do is we have to put a stopgap in the middle. And this, we have 8 controllables we talk about that you can start to lean into: nutrition, hydration, exercise, immune function, environment, mindset, self-care, and mindset. And when you lead into these 8 controllables and you take actions in each one of these, and you use HRV as a guiding factor as to where you put the emphasis or priorities that day, that week, that month, it allows you now to take control back of your health and know where you are every single day, so that you can ultimately get to your car at D3 outside the water park and have a guiding factor to help get you there.
I love what you're saying there, right? It's so important to realize that your 8 factors are so important, because most people don't realize that their life is the emotional stress. Like, it could be, we talk about it in our world, right? You talk about the mental, vocational, financial, your social, your family, your physical, your spiritual. All these areas can cause you some level of stress. And when we do rewiring work, we're talking about this. And I know for a fact, because I've measured this on myself in our studies, that when you actually rewire the brain, you're actually changing the catecholamines inside the brain, which is affecting the HRV. And we can actually see a decrease in sympathetic tone, and we can see the actual nervous system change, and HRV changes and elevates in that as well. That's right. For the people who've been in my world, and you've got your daily rewire forms, especially your evening rewire forms, those are changing HRV metrics and markers on a day-to-day basis. Now, you've done something really interesting, and I love what you're doing. You've taken this and you've created a company with coaches. And tell us more a little bit about what you're doing inside that, because where people can learn about your coaching process, because you're using HRV as an anchor around your 8 pillars inside that as well. Give us a brief kind of overview of what you're doing there.
Yeah. So when you think about this, the soul, we're just a bunch of souls having a human experience, whether that is for 50 years or whether it's for 150 years. We are a soul having a human experience. And your soul encapsulates your mind, your body, your heart, and your spirit. And each one of those has different stressors. And thus they start to add up. They start to accumulate. And what we want to keep you out of is in that state of accumulation. We want to be able to accept stressors and flush them out and deal with them. Accept stressors, flush them out and deal with them. That's the great rhythm between overreaching and regeneration, which leads you to that ownership space. Now, for us, what has happened and what we've seen in the health industry for so long is we've treated them in silos. You're going to treat your mental health. You're going to treat your physical health. You're going to treat your emotional health. You're going to treat your spiritual, purposeful health. But what happens is you're only treating one area, and thus cannot be holistically integrated. Holistic means all, and integrated means together or one. So you have to, if you're talking about a holistically integrated health system, you have to look at everything together. Otherwise, you don't have the right to call it a holistically integrated system. You can't go through one questionnaire and say, oh, we just looked after the mindset category. We just looked after the emotional health category. And now we're just going to focus on nutrition and exercise. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And when we dial this in and we get really focused on this in this area, that's why with us, when you're kind of coming through, we not only look at we've got what we call peak performance therapists. This is the mindset component, emotional, mental, and spiritual health that we're really leaning into. And then we have our functional medicine doc and our functional medicine team that operates with you from a physical component. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you exercising? what does your recovery modalities look like? And then we integrate them together. So you have a team that is working together with you that's been looking at your cellular nutrition, looking at your DNA, looking at your epigenetics, looking at your gut biome paneling to get everything really specific to you. So if we were to kind of take a look at our framework, we've got our base level, which is HRV and the 8 controllables. We teach you to understand your body, to understand the language of your body and how it's communicating with you, and the action steps that need to be taken, the 8 controllables. From there, we have our testing categories: DNA, epigenetics, cellular testing, gut biome paneling. Understand how your body's functioning so that we can now get really specific in some of these categories: supplementation, nutrition, hydration, immune function, and really look after this from a personal standpoint. And then we have the tools. That's when we can get really specific as to, hey, what tools are really going to work for Dr. Trivedi, and what tools are actually going to work for Justin and the lifestyle that he has, and what's going on there, what's going to happen for Kelly or for Sandra or for Rachel or for Christy or for Peter. It's all different. And so that's what starts to happen out of this. And as soon as you start to heal holistically, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and identify how to remove these stressors in certain categories and then deal with the ones that are highest priority and have a movement mechanism, meaning how do we move the stressors through your system and through your body so they aren't there chronically, they're there acutely so that you can grow out of them and you can develop out of them. All of a sudden people are like, man, this brain fog I've had for 25 years is gone. The tinnitus that I've had the ringing in my ears is gone. This irritable bowel syndrome is gone. The pain in my back is gone. The diabetes that I had is all of a sudden reversed. I've been in remission of cancer, and I haven't been fearful of like how to do this, but now I've been in remission for 16 years. Like these types of things are real. I haven't been able to sleep and have a deep sleep for 25 years. And now all of a sudden I'm sleeping soundly throughout the night. It's because we've started to realign the stressors and look at it holistically as to what has to happen. And we heal the soul. It's soul health. Because we don't have a mental health crisis in this country. We have a health crisis. We don't have an obesity crisis in this country. We have a health crisis. We don't have an identity crisis in this country. We have a health crisis. And when we start to disintegrate everything, disintegrate the mental, the physical, the spiritual, emotional, we see the disintegration of our health overall.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you. Everything you said, I agree with you 100% in every aspect of it. And that's why you and I are like, we're two peas in the same pod, saying the exact same thing. I love it. And you're coming from the HRV standpoint, I come from the Rewire standpoint, but it's absolutely the same thing. I want to ask you one final question before we go. 2 questions, actually. One, where does sleep apnea play in part of it with HRV?
So sleep apnea is a big issue. It's a big issue in America, actually. But sleep apnea is, again, a cause of something else that's lying underneath. Chronic inflammation often comes from eating too close to bed, being overweight, not having proper nutrient balance in our bodies, having chronic inflammation throughout our entire body, not having a proper airflow through our sinus cavity, which is often due to inflammation. And so it comes back to being able to understand, okay, if we can lose weight, if we can drop weight, if we can get more efficient from an oxygen production standpoint, if we can get ourselves to establish some type of eating routine, eating window, if we can give ourselves a greater electrolyte balance and start to breathe through our nose instead of our mouth at night, we can all of a sudden start to alleviate sleep apnea at its root cause. Not just giving you a CPAP machine or adding something else that is only going to, again, kind of draw a brush over the top of what's actually happening, because you haven't decreased inflammation, you haven't decreased the stress load on the body at all. You're not getting the deep quality sleep and regenerative stress that you need. And so you're continually going back to this concept, you're continually lost again. You're just adding a tool that is not actually helping you. And it's going to cause just other stressors, other inflammatory markers, other chronic illnesses as you see this time period go from 1 year to 2 year to 5 year to 10 year, how long does it take before dementia starts to set in? How long does it take before some type of diabetes or some other chronic illness takes over your body? Because we've been living in this state of fake health for so long, and just putting these different tools on that doesn't really get to the depth of it. And when you're not sleeping, let's think about this. If you're not sleeping, your lymphatic system and your glymphatic system, the glymphatic system is what literally washes the brain at night and moves all your toxins down to your lymphatic system, which the lymphatic system needs actual pumps to get everything out of your body, which is why we sweat, why we move, why we sit in steam rooms, saunas, all these different high temperature exposures to move this toxins out of our lymphatic system. If we don't get that, if we don't get the deep sleep, all those processes are minimized, thus holding more toxins, holding more inflammation, holding all of these other things that lead to chronic illness. And so sleep is so important, but yet we don't prepare for it the right way. We don't invest time into the greatest thing that will give back to us 100-fold.
Man, you're preaching to the choir here. I love this. I could sit here and talk to you all day, and we will, because you're in Miami, I'm in Miami. You and I are going to have like our own mini conversations and health seminars and things like that, just between the two of us, because we can go deep inside that. Look, everything Justin's doing, I highly recommend. And if you want to know more, can get people get more information on you, Justin.
Yeah, so you can find me on 2 platforms. Number 1 is on Instagram. I'm extremely active there. I answer all of my DMs. So if you ever have a conversation, it's me you're talking with. It's at Justin Roth, ROETH. And then the other one is just go to ownitcoaching.com. You can find all the information for us there. Put any type of inquiry in. And then there's a lot of just free information to have access to there as well.
I love it. I love it. Anything this guy does, he gets it. I'm telling you right now, I talk to a lot of health experts, a lot of people inside this. And if you're watching this and you're part of this community, you understand that, like, I'm interested in helping people perform at the highest level. And what he's done with HRV is something that I've been talking about, and he's been able to put together in a whole package of program. So highly recommend what he's doing. I'm going to become a client of his and do what he's doing, because I can't wait to actually show you the results of what I want to know. What chronic inflammation am I dealing with? Even though I do all the testing, I do all the things that I know. Dude, maybe there's another layer inside that I can get better. I'm open to getting better. So that's what I want you guys to do, is get better every single day. I'm Dr. Roethlingshoefer, aka Dr. Rewire. Justin, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you so much. Hey guys, if you like that video, click on the link over here and you're going to love the next video.